Hey everyone, and welcome to Already Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Star Trek The Next Generation. Not an episode specifically like we normally do. This is a special occasion because this is the episode between seasons. This is where we're going to rank our top 5 best episodes of Season 3, which we just finished. And then as a bonus, we'll also do our worst 3 episodes at the end as well. So look forward to that for the saltiness. This was kind of a notable season in that we kind of expected an uptick in quality because just the reputation of Next Gen is that Season 3 is kind of where it gets good properly. There's a couple of standout episodes before then, but the average quality does go up quite a bit, and I think we definitely felt that this season, which led to an interesting, because obviously this top 5 is not our personal top 5 separately. We sat down, we debated, we came together on a sort of unified, this is already cancelled top 5 of the season, and there was more debate this time versus previous seasons.
Yeah, I think in previous seasons we might have had some back and forth over the specific ordering, but there was never really any doubt over which 5 it was going to be. Whereas this time, at least 1 or 2 episodes that got left off that were being debated for the positions.
Because typically what we'll do is we'll go through the season and we'll just throw out all the names of the things that at least at a glance feel like it could end up in the top 5. And I think we had like 9 or 10 this time. And then we had to really debate like the 4th and 5th spots, and basically which ones were getting cut off.
The top 3, we kind of were like, okay, well those 3 are definitely safe. We may have gone through the order a little bit, but we kind of knew those were the 3. And then we had maybe 5 or 6 left to choose from for the next 2 spots.
Yeah, so there was more of a debate. Alternatively, the worst episode of the season was the thing we agreed on without even having to think about it. We both just said the same thing. Said, "Is this episode right?" And that was it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Without further ado, then we'll get cracking into our top 5 of season 3. Number 5 on the list is probably the most contentious one because I really had to fight for this one. Connor wasn't as enthusiastic about this.
It was closer to, like, on a personal list, it would have been like my 7 or 8.
Yeah, but I really fought for The Offspring, and it's not one that I think is necessarily universally praised. It seems to be kind of a divisive episode. Some people aren't as in love with it. I think it's a very charming episode and plays with a lot of fun ideas for the majority of its runtime. But I think once you get to the last like 10 minutes where the actual ethical debate really kicks in, combined with one of Picard's best speeches today, for me it just kind of it elevated a lot of things. And so many data plots tend to be about him trying to become human or trying to understand something in humanity. And I kind of like that this flipped it on its head, and it was more about Picard learning a bit of humanity from Data. And it was kind of a heartwarming tale by flipping them around a little bit. And it's any science fiction story about learning to trust a robot usually has this ironic realization for the human being who didn't trust robots in the first place, where they go, they're actually being a better human right now than I am because I'm refusing to, empathize.
It's kind of a staple of the genre.
Yeah. And it's not that Picard's ever, been anti-Data or anti-android or whatever, but which it makes this more nuanced. It's not just he hated robots, now he doesn't. This is he dismissed an idea that Data had, and then by the end of the episode he says, you know what, no, this is Data's child, I'm going to fight for his rights and I'm not backing down from it.
I think it's more interesting in some ways in a present day world, and specifically in the world we're in following the past few months of upheaval in the world, and the idea that this was almost like an element of systemic racism from Picard, and that he wasn't even thinking about it. It wasn't like actively being shitty. It was just ingrained thinking. Was like, his first reaction was one thing, and had to actually learn to be better. And not because he's a terrible person.
Yeah, he had to try and understand, rethink his position, listen to what was been told to him, and ultimately empathize. I mean, that's the big word here. So, no. Offspring takes number 5 spot. Number 4 is Sarek, which is of course one of the most original series kind of callbacks I suppose we've had. There's always been ones here or there. Most famously, perhaps episode 2, The Naked Now.
The Naked Now.
Yes.
One of our favorites.
I doubted myself for a second because I was like, was that the original series episode? And if it was, then what's the Next Gen one called? But yeah, it was The Naked Now in season 1. But Sarek, of course, actually brings the character of Sarek into the fold, and kind of gives him what at least seems like a send off for the character, where it feels like a kind of a goodbye, and has some big moments between him and Picard. Picard kind of taking on some of his emotion, and it kind of tackles the idea, because obviously Next Gen by its nature, unlike the original series, does not have a Vulcan member on the main cast, so therefore we don't necessarily deal with Vulcans that much, but obviously they're part of Star Trek's world, so every so often we do get to have an episode that revolves around one, and this is the second most known Vulcan that we have, obviously the first being Spock.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what's so interesting about this episode, is it makes it about Sarek. It's not just stand-in proxy for Spock because he was unavailable or anything like that. It's no, we're actually doing a Sarek story.
Yeah, I love watching the reactions of the crew who had either not met him before, or just familiar with Vulcans enough that when Sarek started acting strange, or when he started being emotional, it kind of stuck out. The idea that Picard was kind of fanboying a little bit and wanted to put on a little concert for him, and just all these little details that make the world feel a bit more alive, because Sarek's this revered figure and has this kind of reputation and has this admiration from the crew. It builds the world. Like I say, I mean, Patrick Stewart, his performance towards the end of the episode when he's kind of processing all the emotions so Sarek can keep his head in the game is it's good stuff.
That's 2 episodes in a row we've talked about Patrick Stewart's performance. It was one of his speeches in the previous episode, and I think it really shows how he is this through line through the whole show, and that really does anchor it with his generally incredible performances.
Yeah. Number 3 is, now this is where we get into like probably the 3 obvious choices for the 3 best episodes, but the order, to sound like a clickbait article on the internet, the order may surprise you. No, not really. Number 3 is just Lee's Enterprise, which is, and this is maybe the one that people may expect to be at least a slot higher. I feel like this had a lot of expectations going into it, because people had been talking about this one. We both knew the name. This is of course the alternate world where things have changed, and we have a Tasha Yar who ultimately over the course of the episode realizes that she's not supposed to be there. Also, Shooter McGavin from Happy Gilmore is our love interest in the episode.
I'd nearly forgotten about that.
Yes, and as you know, he eats pieces of shit for breakfast. So, hey, you got that reference. That means you remember Happy Gilmore just as well as I do.
It's been a few years. Yeah, let's be honest. But
it's been at least a decade for me.
yeah, me too.
It's been a long time. I almost don't want to watch that again because I'm worried it won't hold up. I'm worried.
Almost certainly won't.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that this is a lot of what Star Trek plays with. It's a lot of the fun sci-fi elements that Star Trek plays with. This is one of these concept episodes. But the most impressive thing about it, aside from being here's all these alternate versions of characters, here's this harsher version of the Star Trek world, it's that it somehow gave a fitting send-off to a character who had one of the most ungracious send-offs I've ever seen, and didn't feel like a shoehorned in cheap episode. It felt like, no, that was actually a really touching little send-off for her that kind of, even the character herself, so almost on a meta level, went, the shit death, I'm going to have a better death, I'm going to get like a hero.
Pretty much. And when we say she had such an ungracious send-off, that's for all of TV, not just Star Trek.
Oh yeah, that's yes, for TV in general. There's very few shows that I feel like the top a character death where they're killed by a puddle of evil.
You're never going to stop doing that, are you?
Nope. But no, the delightful episode, and I do kind of love the characters, with the exception of Guinan a little bit, to who's the one who senses the changes in the first place, due to her her species, I guess. No one remembers anything, and it's one of these. It's this weird thing with these episodes. And I talked about the wish from Buffy when we were talking about this episode a lot. This idea that none of the characters actually remember what went on in these parallel universe episodes, because everything gets brought back to normal, and very rarely do they actually get to remember what happened. And more often than not, I would say, even though these two examples don't, typically there'll be the one character who does. It'll be important for one character who did actually live through the experience. But
usually, yeah.
But in both those cases, both the Wish and Ashley's Enterprise, both actually function without feeling like anything is lost because the characters don't remember it. It gives character, because it's almost like it's a like a thesis on the world and why the characters we have are so important. Like seeing what they're like in a world that's darker and crueler actually makes you appreciate the versions we do have.
Yeah. And in a weird way, in this particular example, it's not really about them for most of it. You know, like ultimately, a lot of it boils down to Tasha, right? And it's about her ultimately. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great things for our characters in there, like okay, them having to make that leap of faith that the world that they've come from is a better world than this one, even if things are different, and and maybe some people have died that haven't here, but having to make that decision anyway. There are still really strong character beats for sure, but none of them remembering takes away from the fact that it's clearly Tasha's story at the end of it, and she would remember because of the way the time travel works in that episode.
Yeah, it's actually the one major difference between that and The Wish is that in The Wish, the whole point of the episode is like, okay, what if Buffy never had her friends and family? So the whole point of it is this is how much darker her life would be without those things. So in Star Trek's Yesterday's Enterprise does have a similar idea in that it creates this event in the past that I don't think we really knew about before. This battle that kind of convinced the Klingons to ultimately side with the Enterprise, or not the Enterprise, side with the Federation, and kind of brought that peace into like real being. And obviously I think the one in Buffy has more meaning because the actual thing it's talking about is something that we actually always had in the show. It was always her meeting everyone else. Here, the actual event that alters is something that's been kind of made up in retrospect. It's something that's kind of, and it's important, don't get me wrong, it's actually a really fun bit of mythology building, because it's like, hey, this thing was so important, this event was so important in that piece. We saw the start of it in Undiscovered Country. Obviously we hear bits and pieces from whenever they're talking to Worf, or we'll hear
here's like a concrete event.
Yeah. So it was fun to kind of explore. It was fun to learn about this event through this context of here's what happens when it didn't happen or didn't go the way it was supposed to. And so
it feels like it's almost the sort of thing that they don't talk about that much in the real world, because it doesn't seem that monumental in their situation, but it's just it's that first building block but they don't realize it at the time.
And my point there was not to critique either Trek or Buffy. My point just being is that both, like, they're very similar concepts in terms of episodes, but both pull it off exceptionally well. But they have different focuses,
goals.
Yeah, and they're both exceptional examples of this type of episode. To the point where I'm like, they're probably the two best examples of this type of episode. Even on the shows that have kind of, because Legends of Tomorrow's dabble, but Legends of Tomorrow, even at its best, it's not as good as Star Trek The Next Generation at its best, or Buffy at its best, right? Legends is a popcorn show. Yeah,
in a weird way, it's not trying to be. It's not taking itself seriously in the same way. So it almost feels like you're putting it down by saying it's not as good in that sense. But I think it's equally as good in that it sets out to achieve what it aims for. It manages that, and I think that's the case with these two examples here. Is they had a specific goal in mind and pulled it off, whereas a lot of these episodes don't. They fall flat in some element or another.
Yeah, but what you're aiming for is important, because if you aim higher and hit it, then it is technically better.
Sure. I think in the sense that there's a difference in aiming and tone that matters.
Sure. They aim high and they hit hard, so I don't know where this metaphor's going. All right, that's number 3. This is Enterprise. Number 2 is Deja Q. That kind of rhymed. I did not mean that. So Q episodes so far, and I do, the reputation of Next Gen, I know that the Q episodes kind of diminish in quality, where by the time we get to the later seasons, the Q episodes they're okay, but they're not necessarily the greatest thing out anymore. Whereas so far, admittedly, Q was in the pilot, and the pilot wasn't that great, but Q's appearances since then have all been pretty good.
They've been amongst the best of their respective seasons.
Yeah, season 1 is maybe obviously the exception, but season 2 and 3's Q episodes are 2 of the best episodes of both seasons. And this one is interesting because it's actually more about Q, unlike the previous, because in Q Who, when he pops up and he introduces the Borg and so
he's just the facilitator.
Yeah, whereas here it's he's made human, and he's with, in fact, one of the famous gifable moments of this entire show. Picard with the looking up from the facepalm.
Yeah,
is when Q calls him his best friend. It's a really funny episode. It's a really charming episode, and actually makes you kind of like Q by the end because he does the right thing. Even though, like, because I remember talking a lot about the end of the episode about
there
how
was some perhaps questionable motives, but ultimately it kind of didn't matter because he still did the right thing.
Well, it was even once he got what he wanted, he still did the right thing after as well. He sort of kept true to his word. So it was kind of like, okay, like we're kind of into him more as a character now, where he is very mischievous, and we've compared him to Mixie Pitlick so many times, but more than ever after that episode, I'm like, he's Mixie. He's Star Trek's Mixie. That's what he is.
And who doesn't want a Mixie on their show?
Yeah. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, Mixie Pitlick is Q to Superman.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's the easiest way I can describe it. So no, I mean I don't have much more to say other than it's delightful. It was funny, heartwarming, dare I say, in places. And plus, we got to see
one of the funniest episodes as well, and that helps.
Yeah, and I think there was one of the strongest strengths of that episode was that we got to see almost every main character interact with Q. Even if it was just for one scene.
Maybe like one who didn't, but I can't remember now for sure.
Because I distinctly remember Crusher giving him, not an enema, but she was kind of like doing something with his back, and he was. It
might have been
thumbnail.
like just Wesley that didn't have a scene with him.
Well, no one wants to meet Wesley. It's fine.
Exactly. We probably gave it credit for that.
So yeah, there you go. Deja Q. And then number one, the obvious choice after, since it's not appeared yet, is the best of both worlds, which marks the first time that the finale has actually been the best episode. Maybe even the first time it's been on, because I mean, season 2's finale definitely was not on its best episodes.
It wasn't. I can't remember what season 1's finale was, admittedly.
Season 1's finale was not bad. That was the one that reintroduced the Romulans into the game.
Oh yeah, okay, that was pretty solid. That
I don't know if it was top 5. It might have done.
It might have done. It could be somewhere on there.
I have to go back and check. But Best of Both Worlds, of course, is one of the most famous episodes of the entire show. We love Q Who back in season 2, which notably I said when we reviewed this, last episode, I said that I still think Q Who is my favorite episode. So it's interesting that season 2 has my favorite, probably my favorite 2 episodes actually. Cause I think Q Who and A Measure of a Man are probably still my 2 favorite episodes. But the quality of the season overall is much better in season 3. There's far more.
Oh yeah,
great episodes and solid episodes compared to those previous seasons. But no, this is. I think obviously we were expecting the fun stuff with the Borg. We were expecting Picard, the simulation, that big shocking. I was not expecting the exact details of the cliffhanger, however, and I was not expecting this great story that was very effectively teasing that Riker might be taken over and that they might actually just not have Picard. Now we know they're not because we have the hindsight of he's in the rest of the show, but. They honestly,
did it
really good.
well enough that even knowing that, I understood why. If you're watching this as it aired for the first time, without any knowledge, maybe there's been no casting calls or announcements about the following season yet.
Especially without the internet, where because right now, these days on the internet, immediately after this episode would have aired, what would have happened is you'd have a lot of websites going, we contacted about he's got a 5-year contract, so this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There'd be a lot of that immediately. On the internet.
Yeah, but at the time when this aired, I completely believe that you would be questioning, is this it? And the fact that it can make me convinced of that feeling, even knowing the truth, is incredibly effective.
I suppose there was always a chance that he would stay on the show, but he'd just be a Borg for the rest of the show. He'd be like a villain for the next season, so he'd still be there for the whole thing.
Honestly, these days, that would be a completely plausible thing to do. I can think of a couple of shows that have kind of done that same sort of trick. And
of course, Star Trek, of course, typically, like, the idea of having the same villain show up in every episode of a season of this show is ridiculous because, this is literally the second time the Borg have appeared, and which is actually part of its strength because they feel like such the revered threat by the time they show up because they were teased so sufficiently at Q Who. And then in this episode, it's kind of like, oh shit, they're actually here. They're here earlier than we expected. We have to build things up. So I love the intimidation of the Borg, that level of threat, them trying to duck out and get away from them, all the plot with Riker and fighting with his possible replacement. All that arc was really solid. And then on top of that, you've got all the actual cliffhanger. Fire the weapons, dun 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 dun. In fact, yeah. Is that what that tune? Because even before, long before I saw this show, I always associated a to be continued with the din 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 din. Right? Is this where that came from?
I know what you're getting at with that music sting, and you're doing that, and I can hear it in that episode, and you're quite possibly right. The problem is when I hear someone do that, rather than, obviously when I hear it in the actual episode, this is different. When I hear someone do what you just did, it sounds like they want to go into the cliffhanger music from the end of EastEnders, just the drums. And that's what it sounds, and it always just sounds like that's what they're imitating to me, even though you're probably right.
Yeah, I can hear it. I mean, I can tell the difference between those two things. And it's not so much that I'm saying this invented that particular sound, more just the association with the to be continued.
It quite possibly could have done, because this is far enough back now.
Yeah, so I'd be curious. I'd be curious if there's examples of to be continues before this that did the similar thing where they'll have the music playing, but then the last few beats of the music will be den 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 den.
Mm.
You know, like I don't know. That's maybe,
I can't think of any previous examples from the top of my head, but who knows?
Yeah, I can think of examples from later for sure. Like you know, it became a thing. This is what we're talking about. I associate it with the to be continued. Obviously, they kind of done away with it because now everything's just so serialized that you don't get to be continued. You don't get two parters in that way anymore. So
rarely, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, hell, there's literally TV shows that could just end every episode with to be continued if they wanted to, because technically it's true. But
I think one of those shows should have the balls to do that. Just put a to be continued card at the end of every episode before you go into your credits.
And at the end of every season finale, instead of putting to be continued, put Finn, but then with a question mark.
Oh,
because they've not been renewed yet.
Until you know it's your final season, and then you can do the dot.
Yes. There you go. So there you go. That's our top five of season 3. It was actually a tougher discussion because there was so many possible episodes. There was at least another 3 or 4 that we thought could be on that top 5, and we kind of debated out. At least for the 4th and 5th slots, especially.
I think though for our top 3, we were pretty predictable. I think more predictable than we've been in past seasons, even.
Yeah. Yeah, it's possible. I feel like there's some people, like, you know, maybe the controversy would be that some people would put Yesterday's Enterprise at number 1. Like, I think some people would put that up there.
I think if you go back and watch our reviews as we were going through them, I think that holds up in our current placing, because I don't think we were quite as in love with it as maybe the hype around it was. I think we were definitely more positive about the other 2 that we had above it. Yeah.
All right, so that does leave us, though, with the worst 3 episodes of the season. So, yes, number 3 of the worst 3 episodes is Menage a Troy. Now, don't get me wrong. We did get another big gift moment with Picard when he's doing his sonnet at the end, and that was a good scene. Unfortunately, almost everything before that scene was kind of dull and boring, and... Did not live up to the comedy episode from season 2 that also featured Troy's mother.
I think that's what hurts it more, is that we've had such a good example of what this should be, so expectations were higher, and then you got this, and it was like, well, that was very bland.
Yeah, there's not really a whole lot more to add to it. Is that the biggest fault they have is that they kept Troy and Troy's mother away from Picard. And it's notable that when it perks up at the end, it's because he has to interact with her again. That's where the comedy really comes from. A lot of the episode is Riker with the 2 ladies being kidnapped and him trying to figure his way out. And there's so many scenes in that episode of Riker just at a computer screen, you know, tapping away because he's trying to hack or something. And it's like, this doesn't mean anything. There's nothing entertaining about this.
It's possibly the most boring episode of the season.
Nah, I still got that to number 1.
I don't know. At least that's like actively terrible.
Number 2 on the worst episodes of the season is The High Ground. This is the episode where Crusher gets kidnapped by a very loose parable for the IRA. It's basically what I describe it. This one is just... This is not like laughably goofy or bad as maybe the 1 in 3 slots. It's kind of in this weird awkward place where it's not necessarily bad in its intentions, but ultimately everything about it's so muddy in what it's actually trying to say. The villain and his kind of weird admiration for Crusher comes off as kind of a weird sort of almost love interest kind of feel. It just feels off. It feels like that it's not quite right.
And it's just pretty clunky in what it's doing. Like you say, the intent behind it isn't necessarily bad. It's just so heavy-handed that it's frustrating because you're just like, yes, I get it. And it stops becoming an enjoyable episode, if it ever could have been one, and just becomes the message. And generally, we're all for having a good message in your sci-fi. I mean, multiple episodes in the top 5 had a good message in there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's about having the message be enhanced by the story and not just being, here's the story in costumes. Just the story of the history of the message. It's still got to be enjoyable.
Yeah. I don't really have anything else to add on that one, to be honest. And number 1, our worst episode of season 3. There was no doubt in our minds. We both said the same thing the second we sat down to agree on this, and that is Captain's Holiday, the episode where Picard goes on vacation and gets entangled in a noir / Indiana Jones style
/ James Bond
style for a MacGuffin, where so much of it is just talking about a MacGuffin that doesn't feel that important or is ever really kind of explored that much. The most interesting part were those aliens from the future who are like wanting to interfere with everything is just undercooked and just feels
goes nowhere.
It feels like an afterthought by the end.
The best part of the episode is Picard trying to relax and being annoyed by everyone.
Yes,
and that's what it should have just been for 40 minutes.
Yeah, if it had been 45 minutes of him getting annoyed because he was trying to relax and people kept interrupting him, that'd have been great. I think when we reviewed this, the exact way I put it is that it's actually kind of a fun episode until the plot kicks in about 10 minutes in, and then from then on it's just really dull and bad. And
it's I think this is why I say the other one is more boring. This is actively terrible and makes me annoyed to think about it. Yeah. Whereas the other one, I'm just like, that was very, very forgettable.
And the vast majority of the runtime is relying on Picard's chemistry with a sort of femme fatale style love interest, which just never really rings all that true. And it's not that I can't buy Picard in a romance plot. Honestly, I think whenever they sort of tease a bit of sexual tension between him and Crusher, it works well enough. I think.
But this type of character feels like it would have played better off Riker.
Yes. So, there's a couple of good jokes in the first 5 to 10 minutes when they're setting stuff up, but once the plot actually kicks in, it completely crashes and burns and never recovers for me. So that is number 1. That is Captain's Holiday, the worst episode of season 3. Although notably, it's better than Shades of Grey. So I mean,
it's a low bar, but technically true.
Yes, the low bar is higher than it was last season. So,
but the high bar isn't.
Yes, that's true. Well, notably, though, I think it is worth mentioning, though, that the 3 episodes on the worst of list are 3 of the only poor episodes of the season, though. There was a lot of solid episodes that were, not consideration for the top 5, but were enjoyable.
There's a lot of episodes that were like, this is all right, and nowhere near, this is, going in the shit.
Well, I would go beyond that. I would say good. I feel like all right implies that they're just, kind of okay, right? Whereas I feel there was a lot of episodes that weren't in consideration for that top 5 that I would still describe as good and that are worth watching. So
yeah, that's fair enough.
So yeah, season 3, step up. That is our top 5 episodes of the season and our worst 3 episodes of the season. Of course, let us know what your picks are in the comments. Obviously, we'll be back next week with the beginning of season 4 and seeing what's on the other end of that cliffhanger. But of course, like and subscribe. Liking is really important on YouTube. It lets YouTube know that you think we're worth recommending out, and we can find more audience members, more people like you. So please do that. If you can, of course, support us on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses for your trouble. Helps keep all the content coming, so please have a look and consider it if you wish. Otherwise, guys, on Twitter at @mailed_fuzz for channel updates, but that just about does it from us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching Star Trek, guys. And when it comes to the ladies, Wesley Crusher, he crashes and burns, let's be honest. He's like Captain Picard. On holiday, obviously.